forgot to put my background again. Hold on a second. All right. Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. And welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. Ep.11, Shadow Work Part 2, Learn How to Think. That's what it's about. And I think that's Part 3 in Mark Passio's 5 steps to initiation. I think it's 5 steps to initiation. 5 steps to... initiation. That's what it is. So this one is the third one, but it's a really important one to get to the other two, which was stop lying and stop dreaming. Those two aspects are really dependent on learning how to think, because in the stop lying one. So before I continue, I just want to make my introduction that I usually forget, that the Great Work Launchpad is here to help people get initiated into doing the great work. So you can come on, have your say, and then log off if you want. You want to present something, present a topic. You can contact me on my site. I have a contact page. You can write me an email, say, hey, I'd like to do this. Or if you want an idea on how to get started, I could give you some homework, and then you could we'll do the homework, and then you could come present it, and that would help you get started. So I guess that's all I got to say about that intro. Hello, Brendan. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, what's going on?
Not much. Just doing the little intro, explaining some stuff. So as I was saying, learning how to think. It's a crucial part of the aspects of stopping to lie to yourself. Stop dreaming that the world is a different way than it is. Because part of the learning how to think, there's a lot to it, but some of it is that we have these, it's part of learning about yourself, so self-knowledge, which is what shadow work is about as well. And in the self-knowledge, you learn about psychology, and you can learn logical fallacies, and that's part of learning how to think. And there's cognitive biases, so that's learning about inherent biases in our psychological makeup, which can keep us limited, where we limit ourselves or we fool ourselves by not knowing that these biases are present and how they're keeping us. Like, for example, there's anchoring bias, so that can keep you attached to things, and then or you won't want to consider new information or things like that. So if you learn about these biases, you can be aware that these are propensities and these are part of our psychological makeup, and then you can choose to be aware that you have a tendency to engage in these biases, and then you can elevate yourself above them to a more powered position to take control, self-control and self-govern how you operate as a consciousness being, a psychological being. So learning how to think is super important. What can I say? That's a little intro. And So people can think like learning how to think, but I already did that. I went to school and I learned how to think. I know how to do math. I know how to read. I know how to write. I think all the time. There's things that happen and I think about it and then I make a decision. Um, yeah, that's part of thinking, but there's more depth and um, breadth. It's more broad than just those simple everyday little things. And when we're trying to understand learning how to think and its importance, well, learning how to think is like the understanding and the logic and the processing part of the trivium method, which we'll get into maybe this episode or the next one. And so that deals with the why. You have everything out there, even within us, and this is the who, what, where, when, and we even have the how, and that's what we're going to do in the world, but things that are already happening are part of the how. So how is this happening? And the understanding part, that's the why. So who, what, where, when, you got the why, and that leads to the how. And the how is already happening, and you can figure out how something is operating. How did it come to be? How did it come into existence? Well, you need to engage in the why, that process of understanding, deeper aspect of thought. And it's so you can look at learning how to think, knowing how to think properly as like a causality, because that's what why answers. Why is getting to the root causal factors, and that's what we're trying to get at, is the causality of how to operate in the world and generate in the world. And it's for problem solving. This is how we're going to solve problems, by understanding. So you can relate this to ontology and the nature of the problem. So there's a problem and you're going to find a solution. Well, you have to understand the problem. So the best way to understand it is in a causal dynamic, in the plane of causality, where you're going to look at why that problem is there. Because if you don't know why it's there, and then also the question of how it got to be that way, well, that is the why it is there. So the why and how can often be interchanged, depending on how you structure the question of how. So how did it get to be that way? Or you can say, what made it happen? Well, what made it happen is the why it happened. But in general, we're talking why, and usually the what is part of the stuff that's you take in as part of your grammar or your knowledge or your input. Yeah, so that's just a little intro, and I got more to say on that. But Brandon, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, yeah. The biases. Once we become alert and conscious of that, then we can start to, become more aware of when we fall victim to them. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to discern truth from falsehood. And the more we stay into those, have biases and contradictions, then the more likely we are to stay in our comfort zone and to, and to not want to dive into the realm of truth. So you also had brought up, people think they know how to think because they may have went to school, they may have gone to, a university, and they may have gone through the societal conditioning, but true thought in and of itself is never really explained, or it's never really gone to a deeper aspect, to get into the realm of mentation and causality, and to create within the mind, to start to peel back those layers and start to learn more and to go into the depths. Because once you start to do that, it's it's like you go into the realm of infinite, because the mind can learn so many things and it can know so much. So you can learn these things, but you also have to know why. And how do you know this knowledge? How, like, how do you prove it to yourself? Have you got to the root, that causality? And that right there is where the true power, lies in, because that's right there is what creates more. creation. That is causality in and of itself. So that logical process is how we come to understand things, and then of course, we test it, we come to verify them, and we put it back out into the world for others to learn. And it's that same threefold modality that goes into that infinite pattern, that infinite loop of that infinite feedback of the individual and the individual throughout hell existence. And that's how we can come to know things and help verify them. It is that logic, that knowing, hell part of the mind that man really needs to dive deeper in.
Yeah. It's well, we'll talk about it more when we get to that section in my notes there. So I'm gonna continue with we'll get into more of the process we're hinting at here. So a little bit more into the why. So we're talking about why do we want to learn how to think? Like, why should someone care about this? And I've already mentioned it's for problem solving. So learning how to think will help you be a better problem solver. And why is this important overall? What is the purpose to think better? To know how to actually think? Well, it's to get at truth. That's what we're trying to get at, is to be able to ascertain truth. So in any situation, you want to have the reality of that situation. You want to know the truth of what is going on. So usually when you take in information, it's going to be to help make sense of the world. So you take in information and you understand what's going on in the world. Well, would you want to take in information that is false, that then you build your inner construction of what the outer world looks like based on what is false? Well, it's going to be a false representation, a false perception. Your map is going to be erroneous. It's not going to be an accurate map of the territory of reality. So then when you're going to use that map to navigate in reality, you're going to be navigating in an incorrect way because you've taken in things that are not true, and so you're going to try to get somewhere metaphorically. And are you actually going to be able to get there? Well, maybe not. If your map is not an accurate reflection of the territory, you're going to be like, oh, I got to get into a boat to cross the river to get over here, but it's actually a mountain you got to climb over. And so, you're not prepared. You get there and you carried a boat with you, but it's actually a mountain you have to climb. So you needed better shoes, and you didn't bring shoes, you brought water shoes. So you can't climb the mountain. Anyways, that's a silly little metaphor there, but so we're trying to get at truth. So that's just for what you want to do and navigate in life, but also in problem solving. You want to solve the problem? Do you want to actually solve it? Or do you want to just half-ass it and maybe solve some parts of it, but then the problem's still going to remain? Or are you just, rearranging the decks on the Titanic, so to speak, where the problem's just going to keep staying there, but you think you did something? And that's what a lot of people do with their attempts at solutions for problems in the world, where they come up with solutions that aren't solutions, or they're convinced, or they believe, or someone influenced them to think that, such as growing up in the society is going to inherently convince you that certain things are solutions, like voting and politics and monetary reform and whatever, take your pick. But, some of these might be addressing some surface level problems, but there are deeper problems which never get addressed. So those deeper problems always remain. And so you might be thinking, I'm addressing the surface level problems. an exoteric layer. But the esoteric layer, you're like, oh yeah, I'm also addressing this with this solution, but you're not. You're only like trying to stamp out, that game at the carnivals or whatever, where I think it's the groundhog comes out and you got to hammer him
A
down.
whack-a-mole.
Yeah, that's it. That's the mole.
Yeah.
So you're just whacking moles. Oh, here's another problem. Here's an effect. Here's I'm going to vote here, vote harder here, vote for this one. Oh, this one's going to solve this problem. Which mole do I want to whack? So you're like trying to figure out which one you want to whack. So you're going to vote that way, or monetary reform or whatever. Pick your thing. But the underlying problem is there's going to be moles that keep coming at you. So it's not going to go away. So all these problems that we have in our society, in our lives, or in our personal lives, or in the aggregate society and the way things function, well, all these problems are essentially rooted in bad or wrong thinking. And this is what it boils down to, is an inability to discern truth from falsity, right from wrong. And the wrong thinking eventually leads to wrong behavior. And it could be minor amoral behavior that you get wrong, but it's an impediment to what you wanted to do, and then you learn from your mistake or whatever. And then the greater ones are immoral problems, where it leads to immoral behavior. And then the immorality persists. And that's where we get our persistent enslavement as a condition, through our delusion of voting for masters to perpetuate the legitimacy of the belief in authority as a right, as a moral behavior to manage or guide or control everyone else. So most people have wrong thinking, and they do it because they think it's right. So this, I guess, would fall into part of the stop dreaming, and also part of the stop lying to yourself. And so they do it because they think they're doing it because it's right. They have this perception of what is good, and then they're pursuing that goal, the ends of what is good. Otherwise, they usually wouldn't pursue things that they perceive as wrong or bad, and they wouldn't pursue them. I'm not saying people don't do that. So they wouldn't continue in that way if they didn't see it as good in some way, or as right in some way. There's even the necessary evil argument. So, it's necessary, it's the lesser evil. We got to go for the lesser evil. So it's good in some way because the other one is, the other one is more evil. So it's even less good. So the other one is more good relative to the one that's less good. So it's all these in the spectrum and degrees and scales and grades between a polarity of what is perceived as good and what is perceived as evil. And even those who willfully choose the wrong way, knowing that it's wrong, it's still wrong thinking. So even if they know it's wrong, if we're talking about something that won't get them the result they want, even if it's amoral or something that is immoral, and they pursue it anyways, it's not like, well, that's right thinking because they know what they're doing. They still know what they're doing, but it's still wrong thinking because it's rooted in what is wrong, in the wrong behavior that's not aligned with a goal. So they might have a goal that's different, and they're going to get their goal, but they're going to do a wrong behavior in order to get their goal, which is what we have a lot in the controller class. The dark occultists, the hidden hands, manipulators, whatever you want to refer to them. They do a lot of wrong, but it's still based on wrong thinking because they're choosing the wrong. So it's still wrong thinking, even though they're going to get something that they want as a goal. So it could be getting something, doing wrong, and you don't get what you want because you just want to be a fool or a dickhead or whatever. Or you could choose a wrong in order to get what you want, but it's still wrong. Either way, it's still wrong thinking. And so ultimately the importance, so again, we're getting at the importance of getting to the truth and having right and correct thinking. because it's important to be right and to want to be right and to want to know if you're wrong, not just to want to be right just to be right, but to want to be right so that you know that you are on the right path, so that you know that, if you're in an argument, that you're arguing for something that is true. So it's not to be right just to be right, but to be, so you want to be shown that you're wrong. So there's like one of these quotes where, your friends can lie to you, but your enemy will, if they're an honest enemy or someone perceived as an enemy, they'll tell you the things that you don't want to hear. So a friend can do that too. But it's this quote about how your enemy won't bullshit you. So it's important to be called out on being wrong if you actually want to be right. And that's where an impediment to this is ego attachment and like calcified ego, where it's about the I. And this is one of the problems with a lower form of ego as opposed to a higher form of ego, a higher representation of I-ness, of a higher self, a truer self, a realer self, more aligned with what's true and right and good and moral, as opposed to a lower self, which is less aligned. And these are potentials we can strive for in the positive sense, is that this ego calcification and attachment and the failure to admit that you're wrong. And people don't really want to know that they're wrong. They just want to believe that they're right. They don't actually want to be right. They just want to believe that they are right. So they argue positions, and, you could say everyone does their best and whatever, and, there's still more people can learn about learning how to think and how to learn so that you can actually argue for something that you've verified, etc. But when you're having a conversation and you're arguing a point and you want to get a point across, you could be wrong, and you have to be open to the other person demonstrating why you are wrong. And so that you can be like, oh yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was wrong. And now you've let go of what was wrong. So you're not in a calcified ego state where you cannot admit wrong. Because in this state, admitting wrong is like looking at yourself as inferior. A lot of people don't want to engage in this lost phrase of I was wrong because they think it makes them look weak. Because then if you're wrong, then you look stupid or you look like a fool. So they're very stuck in hubris and arrogance, because arrogance, a lot of people shoot out the word arrogant, but it's not really arrogance that they're talking about. They're just talking about someone who has pride in themselves or is sure of themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But arrogance is about making a false claim. So you're making a claim of truth, but it's false, and then you stick to your guns, and, that's arrogance. So people can be stuck in an arrogant modality of hubris where they just do not want to admit they're wrong because, again, it makes them, they think, oh, I'm going to look stupid, I'm going to look foolish. But admitting that you're wrong is a sign of strength and of wisdom, because you're showing through your behavior that you actually do care about what's right. So these people are confused where they don't want to admit what's wrong. They don't want to look at themselves honestly. They think it'll make them weak. They think they'll make them look like a fool. Well, if you are wrong, you're already a fool. And when you double down and you remain attached to your falsity and you don't let it go, then you're even more of a fool. You're doubly a fool. So people end up, So people end up believing as things that are true but are false. So falsity becomes truth, and that leads to a divergent path of accepting more truth. So you could start small and you accept something else, something that's false, and it could be trivial. But then that could lead to you use that as an axiom, as a foundation to build upon. And since you're accepting that as truth, well, if you're using that as a premise in something else you're considering, and you're using that false thing to consider that thing as true because it's a child of that parent, that larger, that other thing you're looking into, one of the constituents, one of the qualities, one of the properties, the aspects within it, is that thing you already accept as false, then your overall premise of that other thing could also be false, and then you're going to accept it, and then you're going to accept something else. So each false thing you accept leads you further and further off of a path of more ideal alignment with reality and with truth. So that's increasing the likelihood of greater chaos from your actions based in that falsity. So when you accept one simple thing, maybe no chaos will come about it. But then as it builds up into more and more falsity and your behavior is based on it, then it increases the likelihood that there's going to be a chaotic outcome of growing proportions that will come about, growing severity based on, like, I guess, the proportion of falsity that you accept. So people believe more and more things that are incorrect, and that leads them more and more on the wrong path. Back to you, Brandon.
Yeah, it just started raining here, so hopefully my connection holds up. It's been kind of crazy with these scattered thunderstorms. But you talked about the importance of admitting that you was wrong. And, Mark Passio talked about this, kind of a lot, saying that those three words, I was wrong, are some of the most powerful words that you can utter, have to yourself and to somebody else. And, just having the care to admit those words is where the power, resides, because then you put yourself in a position to correct your wrong and to fix that mistake or to fix that problem. So when we are willing to admit that, then we are truly showing our true love for truth, our true love and care for wanting to do the right thing. And we open up ourselves to that power to come in and doing the correct thing. And, sometimes it may not, help feel, correct, but it's still the right thing to do, to say, hey, yeah, I was wrong. I'm willing to admit that, and therefore how I can change it and get it right. It doesn't matter, how whatever, the hell endeavor is in. And this is something that I've had to do a lot myself, being a umpire. It's been times when I've been calling games behind the plate. The pitch will come like right down the middle, and I just miss it, you know. And sometimes I'll tell the catcher like, "Hey, hell, I just missed it. Hell, I was just wrong. Hell, apologize. I'll do my best to get the next one. Don't feel good, but some but some of the worst experiences are when the catcher, her little kid will, she'll look back at me and she'll be like, where was that pitch at? And I have to tell her, I have to be honest, like, hey, you know, I, hell, I just missed it. Hell, I just blew it. Hell, I was wrong. You know, but I care enough about admitting that, and then someone can either inform me, hey, you got it wrong. Hey, um, there's no ego, hell attached to it, and like not wanting to be right just to appease your ego, and wanting to be correct just because it is for the care and love of truth, not having, like ego hell attached to it. It's just wanting to align with correctness and doing hell the right thing. So two different things, because there are a lot of people who want to be correct just to appease their ego, to appeal to their belief, to hold up their incorrect, her worldview. That's not what we are hella talking about. It's, of course, the first thing we always talk about, stop lying to yourself. So if you stop lying to yourself, then you will be willing to admit when you was wrong, and you be honest, hell about that. So you can take in the correct hell information to rectify that wrong and make it right. But yeah, that's a real powerful tool that a lot of us need to, understand more, especially when it comes to doing this inner work and on this path for, truth discovery, is we have to be willing to put ourselves in that means to admit that we was wrong, and allow others to also, tell us that we was wrong, then we can reanalyze to, to say, hey, maybe I was wrong, then go on that correct path.
Right on. And that's a crucial part of all this. You brought up care, and we'll talk about this another time. But I just wanted to mention it. People get an understanding that in the trivium process, in the trinity of consciousness, what drives it all is care at the middle. So it's important, if you want to learn how to think, that as I mentioned, it's about truth. That's what we're trying to get to. So you have to care for truth. And if you don't care for truth, then do you really care to learn how to think? No. Unless you're just trying to learn how to think so that maybe you can know what the truth is, and then you can use it to manipulate others. Maybe there's that aspect to it where, yeah, I care about what's true, but not about doing what's true, not about living it, embodying it, and acting upon it. I just care about using it to my advantage, to disadvantage other people. There could be that aspect. But in general, we're talking about true care, and then that would be the dark form of care. And true care is caring about what's truth, moral truth, in order to live by moral truth. So, one of the important ways that people go on the wrong path and they believe things that are false and incorrect, and then they live by them, as I've already mentioned, is related to voting and government and authority. So, the word authority, this also relates to learning how to think. Because a lot of people, they believe authority and experts. So we're not necessarily talking about government here. We're not talking about politicians. We're talking about authorities and experts in any field. So it could be politicians, could be in government, could be in medicine or the sciences, or take your pick of any of the things in math, biology, whatever. There's people who are considered experts and they're authorities on a subject. But authority and expertise does not equate to truth. It doesn't equate to the right thing to do. Anyone can be wrong. So all these experts and all these authorities on a subject, they're regarded as experts or authorities in a subject because they have a lot of expertise. So the expertise is that they've been in the field, they've been involved in that subject matter, and they have a lot of knowledge about it. And again, knowledge doesn't necessarily equate to truth, that it is actually true. It could just be knowledge about something that people believe is true. And we will talk more about that later on, probably next episode. And I went into it talking with Kris Nelson, who interviewed me for a podcast, which will be airing tomorrow. But we'll talk more about that process. And so my point is, anyone can be wrong. They're an expert in their field. They're regarded as having a lot of knowledge about it. The knowledge can be all true. Some of it can be true. But usually they believe, they either know that it's true because they verified it, or they believe they verified it and then believe that it's true when it's actually not true. And in some cases, this could be just they're being honest. They're an honest person and they're trying their best, but they don't understand this process of how to think and these two aspects of knowledge and epistemology. And their verification was flawed or failed, or they just didn't do it. And then there's some people who can, we mentioned the dark care and the manipulators. Well, they can have be an expert in their field, but they can know that what they're saying isn't true, but they're doing it for an agenda. They have an ulterior motive. So they're going to propagate information that isn't true because they want people to engage in certain behaviors, which is usually what lies are for. Lies are to influence others, and through that influence, that information goes into their psychological makeup, into your senses, and then it goes into your consciousness, and then you have thoughts about it, and you think you understand something relative to that knowledge that came in, and then you're going to act upon it. So usually they're lying for the manipulation to produce a certain outcome of behavior that they desire. And that's what we saw a lot in the COVID scamdemic, was that there were things that were said were false. Now, whether these people, as experts or authorities, knew what they were saying were false or they didn't, the outcome was the same because people didn't know how to think and they engaged in this process of appeal to experts, appeal to authority, which is itself a logical fallacy. It's one of the top logical fallacies that has been engaged in for thousands of years, is this appeal to authority. So people say that something is true because so and so said it. Something is true because whatever, this person's an expert, this person's an authority. So there's all this belief because they have faith and trust and loyalty in an individual or a group. There's titles. So people have titles. You're a DR, a doctor, an MD, a doctor scientist, this or that. All these titles, or when you do a certain job, the title of your job will bring with it um, notoriety or a reputation. You can be known for being an authority or an expert in that field. But anyone can be wrong. So you always need to think for yourself and verify things with reality, test things out. Otherwise, if you do not engage in that process, then all you are doing is engaging in trust of the other source, in a faith in what they are saying. You have faith in them. You are loyal to what they say. You're loyal, and this is where you get into cult of personality, where people can, especially in the new age, it can happen anywhere, but you like what someone says and it makes you feel good. So then you develop an identification and a loyalty towards what they say. So then they can tell you many things and you're going to gobble it up, and because you've developed a loyalty towards them. So this is where my next point is emotional mind control. It ties into that. But if you want to say anything about that, Brandon.
I'm just thinking about all the scams that's going on, because people just blindly believe, not knowing how to, correctly think. And, that's what Chris is, like talking about, is knowing how to correctly think, knowing how to problem solve, knowing how to correctly take in information and perceive it correctly. Because if you do not do that, you'll get scammed in this world. Um, and then of course, the
I'll
appeal
get
to
played, son.
yeah, I know. Because we were just talking about this yesterday in the One Great Work Warriors, about all the scam that's going on, like through Telegram bots. You got scams everywhere, so like knowing how to problem solve and, like knowing how to correctly discern information is critical, man. It's key. It is one of the most important things. Just knowing how to do that in reality will help. It will help you when it comes to navigation, because we're just doing like one big hell investigation. We're always taking in hell information. How like Chris said, if you take in the wrong, incorrect, information, that's going to lead to a wrong output. It's that simple. So, that investigation is going to be crappy. That mapping is going to be crappy. It's going to be crappy. It's going to lead to incorrect, bad behavior. So, but yeah, the scams are everywhere, man. You got to know how to think to see through them. and to use discernment to problem solve.
Yeah, and the worst part is people who get fooled because they don't know how to think. You know what they cry? Where do they cry? What's the first thing they cry about?
You say how the first thing they cry about? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Okay. No. They they cry for someone to protect them.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Why
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
the government put a
yeah.
stop to this? I'm a
They'll
big
say,
little
yeah,
baby who can't think
yeah.
for myself. Wah
w-
wah wah.
we need a law to stop this from happening. Like that's one of the things I hate hearing is how something happens and then someone comes up, the government should pass a law. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you just don't know what you're saying.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't want to think for them. They don't know how to think for themselves. They don't want that responsibility.
right.
So they want someone else to do it for them. Someone else protect me from myself.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so childish, and they
yep.
can't even
The
see how
childish mentality.
infantile they are.
Yeah,
It's like you see these YouTube ads. There was one I saw the other day, and I looked into it, and I was like, "This seems like bullshit." Let's check reviews, and so it was like these super small like air conditioners. They're like the one was one site targeted in Canada, and then I looked up all this stuff. Then I went back to YouTube, and then they showed me an American with a different product. Instead of a cube, it was like elongated, but it was a different site. And in the ad, it
yeah,
was like this former NASA engineer who works in Canada, came up with this revolutionary. And then for the American one, it was these two guys who worked in something else, but it was like the same product. And then you go look at the reviews. I looked at the reviews for like the Canadian one. It was just person after person. This doesn't work and blah 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 blah. And that's where one of the comments was, you know, the government should put a stop to this because like, well, you're too stupid. You think what this little device is going to work, and the people were being like triple charged when they put their PayPal information in,
yeah,
triple charging to their credit card because it's like just a fucking total scam, and they just want to like, commit fraud and get away with it. So YouTube has a lot of that shit. They have like
yeah,
AI generated Elon Musk saying invest in this crypto or something, and they have one from like the Canadian Prime Minister. Like YouTube has a lot of fucking scams on there. There's one for
yeah,
the
yeah,
Canadian Prime Ministers, like this Canadian investment fund, and if you click the link in this video, that is the one trusted, backed by the government of Canada. And I'm like, man, people actually believe this shit, and then they fucking actually do it. Like, this is how damn retarded people are, you know? They're just so dumb, they don't know how to think, and they just
yeah.
accept a bunch of nonsense, and they think,
Nonsense.
oh, well, it's an ad on YouTube. It must be good. This is legitimate. I don't have to think for myself. Let's just go put some money in there. It sounds like a
Yeah.
good thing to buy.
And that's the sad part about it is because people have been eating shit and buying shit and just, swamped in shit their whole life. That's all they know, so they don't know, anything outside of shit. They can't see anything out, like outside of shit. Their minds can't create anything outside of shit
So
because,
Matrix 4,
you know,
man, just bringing that to
y-
my mind.
yeah,
You come to eat shit. We're going to serve you
yeah,
shit.
because that's all that people know, man.
That's it.
Uh,
You're living
yeah,
in a modal, but it's not training you how to think because you're not trying to learn how to think. You're not, the awakening Morpheus, the thought representation in
yeah,
the Matrix. It's supposed to. The modal is there to train the Agent Smith to awaken Morpheus. Well, the awaken what? Awaken thought and thinking. Well,
yeah.
people in our modal, they are not awakening their thinking capacities. These scams
Right.
aren't
Yeah.
awakening their critical thinking. They're just uncritical dope heads.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go through the comments. We got a lot of comments. So, right thought is the second element of the Noble Eightfold Path in Buddhism. It's a crucial step towards overcoming suffering and achieving enlightenment. Yeah. It's a crucial step to overcome suffering and achieving enlightenment. It involves cultivating wholesome mental states and directing the mind away from unwholesome ones. Right thought is comprised of three aspects: thought, free from lust. So that has a Nikama Sankappa. I'm not going to read the Sanskrit terms. So thought free from lust, thought free from ill will, and thought free from cruelty. That's good. Becoming aware of the thinking process involves observing our thoughts without judgment. We can ask ourselves if our thoughts are beneficial, kind, and serving our hearts. I can agree with that, and I can also find some issues with that. Letting go of negative thought patterns, yeah, that's a good one. Cultivating goodwill, joy, appreciation, gratitude. Yeah, be grateful of what you have, because it could be
Yeah.
gone very quickly.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm grateful of, no matter how bad things are, we're all enslaved in degrees, and they had it worse in the past. We have so much ease and comfort and abundance, and we could view that as a negative as well. But we're so well off, particularly in the Western aspects, the Western culturalized aspects of the world, and some people are still very impoverished in other parts of the world. So,
Yeah.
relative to the past, even relative to other people right now, we're so well off what we have, even despite, what we know, that we're living in enslavement and immorality, and it's not right, and there's injustice all around us. There's, it's still a lot better than what others have, and it's been a lot better than what's in the past. And we still have a lot of improvements to do, but there's still
Yep.
this aspect of gratitude to be grateful for, especially when you have this knowledge, and as much as it is suffering, because then you have the responsibility and you have to bear that weight. That's what the responsibility of the truth. When you care for truth, well, you have to bear that weight, and it's a lot to bear, and to do something with it, and to put it out, and to teach. And ignorance is bliss, in terms of, well, you don't have that weight to bear, but the ignorance is not bliss, because it's what perpetuates that enslavement that they're not even aware that they're in. So admitting you're wrong is a huge sign of strength. Those who can't admit wrong are the weakest, yeah. Cosmic apology, I was wrong. The strengthers are greater than the weaksters, yeah.
Weeksters.
Yeah. So then they're talking amongst themselves. So here we got authority. A little etymology there. Words are weapons. I'm an arms dealer fitting you with weapons in the form of words. Weapons of mass inflection. Yeah, I like words. Appreciate language. Language is wonderful. And yes, it can be used to manipulate.
Yep.
But it's used to free. That's why Liber, his book. And in French, it's the same, because B and V can be interchanged. In French, it's libre for liberty, libre, and instead of a B, you put a V, and livre. So libre and livre, it's the same word written the same way, but a B instead of a V. And the V is the book, and the B is freedom. So that carried on from French. And
The language gets a bad rap from a lot of people, man. I'm like, no, we just need to understand it. We just need to understand it more.
Especially the new age minded, it's like, like anti-logic, anti-thought, this whole
Yeah.
meditation, it was mentioned at the beginning, just don't judge your thoughts. Yes, initially don't judge your thoughts, but then afterwards you got to judge them. And so then you can choose more optimal ways, or change
Correct.
your
Yep.
thinking. And so the new age, the whole language is limiting. Like, well, how else do you want to communicate? When you want to
Yeah.
have telepathy?
Yeah.
Well, then what are you communicating in telepathy? Are you communicating words, or you're just communicating colors? Like, you're projecting that you see blue on the wall to some, like, you're going to need abstractions to conceptualize and, make greater sense, and go into the metaphysics and the categorizations of things. And so, I don't know. There's always going to be words and language.
Well, when we've, brought it down to just text messaging, of course it's going to be limiting, but we've strayed away from those face to face, true conversations, that actually brought true, true value, then yeah, that was, had a more depth, a more understanding, compared to just text messaging and, um, these social media, 3-word text. Of course, that's limiting. Of course.
Yeah. Reduce, what is it? Reduce the, restrict the language and you restrict the thought and therefore
Yep.
the perception of reality. I'm
Yep.
paraphrasing a Philip K. Dick quote.
Yep.
I've used it in one of my articles and I've turned into a presentation on the trivium there. That one's one of my favorites. And that's what was in 1984.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much said the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Control.
When he's
Yep.
talking to George, and George is explaining how the Newspeak version 5 or whatever is like, it's the best version yet. Instead of like
Yeah.
saying good or very good, it's just double plus good. And
Speaking like a true cult member.
yeah, he's talking about how great it is to reduce the language to only. He's like, I predict in so many years that the English language will just constitute like 200 words or something. I don't remember what the amount he
Gosh.
said, but it was like so little words, and he'll be like, we'll be able to say everything with so few words, and it'll be so efficient and so wonderful. And it's like, wow. And
Yeah.
that's one way of thinking about it, but the other way of really understanding it is you're going to be restricting
Yeah.
your ability to reference things in reality. Hence the
Yes.
necessity for the abstraction capacity and
Right.
conceptualization, because not everything is just colors and shapes or things
Right.
you can point to. There's more than just that. It's not like, trees and good and double
Right.
plus
Like
good.
that's why we have an infinite amount of words to describe an infinite amount of things. You try to boil that down into 200 words. Well, then you're boiling reality down and trying to put it in a box. And like, that's the whole problem. You're trying to control reality by controlling the language by
Exactly.
trying,
Yeah.
like, and that's what people don't get. And, the importance of language and how it's describing reality and why we need to understand it more so we can align to reality and understand it.
Yeah, exactly. So, getting back to where we were, talking about authority and experts, and I had mentioned emotional mind control as the next thing. I don't remember what it was in reference to. Anyways, we'll continue. Whoever's watching the video, you can
Could have been
probably
the
remember.
bias.
Oh yeah, the attachment to other people, the loyalty and faith in them because you're
Yeah.
emotionally influenced. So that's
Yeah.
engaging in emotional thinking because you were made to feel good, or the information they provided had a benefit in your life, whether in your internal state of well-being. So again, words and word magic, and how words cast spells on our minds, and we can inculcate. So the words are summoning. So have you have magician, sorcerers, and you have summoning spells on the ground, and it's the symbol on the ground, and then it can summon a demon or a monster. Or you have like, I think it was in Final Fantasy or something, Final Fantasy 7, they summon Isfet and Shiva and not Isfet, but whatever the fire guy.
Ifrit.
Ifrit. I'm
Yeah.
too much into Maat. Isfet.
Yeah. I'm like, man, if
Ifrit.
Ishfet was in that game, I missed it.
Yeah. I played that when I was a teenager. It was so long ago. But yeah, so like the whole summoning aspect. What are you summoning? You're summoning a creature. You're summoning an entity. Well, when you're speaking things and you're influencing people, what you're doing, you're inculcating ideas and imagery. So there's this whole aspect of the science of imagery where people in the past and even now, poets and orators, people who were good at speaking, oration, they were the
Yeah.
ones doing storytellers or doing plays and acting, and they used their voice to inculcate images into your mind to make you see certain things that weren't present. And that's what a story is, and that's what poetry can do. And this inculcation can summon within you images. So it can summon things. It's inculcating certain emotional states. It's inculcating imagery to make you see that imagery and then reflect upon it, which can then have emotional associations, or that imagery can be associated with other concepts, and that will trigger thoughts within you. And all this just from speaking. So this power of manipulation is very present now as it was in the past, where you can be inculcated with word symbol magic as a spell on your mind to summon imagery and emotional states that then influence you and your behavior. And that can influence you towards liking them or influencing you towards hating someone else. And so words are amazing because that's how we think of things, as how we perceive and conceptualize realities in terms of words and what they reflect in reality. So this aspect of emotional mind control is an important one when we're talking about learning how to think, because it's not to have your emotions do the driving. So in that internal part, right, down at the bottom here is our internal domain, where we have thoughts and emotions. Those are internal to you. They are not external. Now, the emotions can carry out as physiological responses, so they can be, they can be seen externally. People can see your pulse rate on your neck or on your arms or something, or see that you're becoming flushed. So there's emotional reactions that then trigger physiological changes. So emotional reactions that then trigger chemical changes in your body, in your heart rate. So your heart rate will change based on the psychological inner state that is a feedback between your thoughts and your emotions based on what is happening. And it could be feeding back on yourself, you having your own thoughts, which is where a lot of anxiety attacks happen, is that thoughts bounce off of thoughts and off of emotions, and it bounces off internally, and someone panics and freaks out and gets anxious and foresees a horrible future, and then they can't breathe, and then they go into hyperventilating, or they feel sick, and then they can vomit. They feel like they're going to vomit, and they can actually do it. Well, that wasn't actually because they ate something that was bad for their health. It's all because of this internal domain. It's important to understand, this self-knowledge, this psychology, where they induced a sickness in them as not even a placebo of something physical coming into the body, but just a metaphysical aspect beyond the physical. Of it could be what someone else says, but it's ultimately within them, within their internal, what I call the external and the internal reality, the external existence and your internal existence. Well, your internal existence is part of that external existence, but it's isolated within you. And within that domain, there's what I refer to as a multiverse, because just as I was saying before, you can have images inculcated into you, and you can create worlds, so to speak. You can create so many things internally, but it's not happening in the actual real world. So it's a multiverse where you can, in a sense, I'm using it symbolically, not as a literal multiverse in your mind, but you can create anything and then you can destroy it, and then you can create something else, or you can recreate it. And it's just such an amazing ability, this power of imagination. How did I phrase it? An imagination factory powered by an abstraction engine is how I referred to our psychological psyche consciousness aspect. It's an imagination factory, so we're producing a bunch of things we imagine, and especially when we're trying to come up with answers, which I've talked about many times before, and we're going to invent. We have a question, we're going to invent an answer. Well, there's our imagination, and then, well, is it true or not? And for some people, well, it doesn't matter if it's true. It answers the question, and it makes me feel good. And someone else gave me that answer, and it made me feel good, so I'm going to accept it. And so this is how this imagination, lots of positive, but also negatives. It's a dual sword, just like
Yep.
consciousness is. It can create great good and it can create great evil, as history has demonstrated. So this aspect within us of being influenced, what I'm getting at is this emotional aspect is especially powerful, because that's tying into, again, care, what we care about. Because when we're going to have an emotion about something, well, it's going to affect how we're going to behave, because we're going to have, it's usually going to influence what we're caring about doing at that particular moment, oftentimes. So we're going to desire something as a result, desire or not desire something, two sides of the same coin. It's ultimately about motivation to do something, motivation to not do something, do something else. And so our emotions are so crucial, but when we're engaging in our emotions and we're letting them lead without, putting a gap and doing some more feedback, like, okay, this is my emotional state. What does that mean? Um, Doing some more feedback between your emotions and your thought, not just going from your emotions and then boom, right out to action and leading from that emotional state, because that can get you in trouble. So you got to put that gap between doing something, that response, and the stimulus, which is usually external, but like I said, it can be internal, where you think about things. So the stimulus is coming from within yourself, and then you could feel some way and then act upon it. But you got to put a breather on that active aspect when your emotions kick in, and then you're just going to react. So instead of just reacting, um, engage in a more responsive, instead of just reactionary, more of a responsive capacity. So that's where a lot of the biases can come in as being helpful, and mindfulness. And so be mindful of your thoughts. Reflect upon what you're thinking and how you're feeling, so that you don't let your emotions take over and drive you off a cliff or whatever, as a metaphor, and drive you into an outcome that you could have avoided if you took some time, took a breather, and you decided how you wanted to respond to something, instead of just responding to it from an emotional basis.
Yeah, that manipulation of the hell emotions is one of those things that I'm constantly, trying to analyze myself. Because you may be good in certain aspects, but then you get around, like family members or like friends, and then you may, catch yourself going back into those biases. So that constant progression of of self hill improvement. But how when we react in that emotional, mindset, that irrational, mindset, the emotions are always like a roller coaster. So it's like how when we react to that and we put that in the place of logic, you never know how what you are going to get. And when you look at and you analyze all of the results and reality of people who have been in that emotional, mindset and have done that, have reaction, it has usually led to a negative consequence or something that led to something that was even more negative. So that is the importance of learning and being cognitive when you are put in that position to take the time, take the due diligence to step back and try to perceive things a little bit differently so you can gain more control to make that more reasonable, how logical, how response. Because in that her reaction is just, her fight, flight, or freeze. And that's like the lowest part of our brain or our consciousness that we want to be in. And another way, or another means for people to help learn this stuff, is to go and study and learn about the brain. Like how it's made up in the stages of health progression and health development, and how the brain stem and what it does, and like the neocortex and all the parts that make up the health limbic system, and all of those functionalities in tandem, and what they do and what they control. You don't have to do it from like a deep, like neuroscience level, but just, get a broader, um, you know, her realization, because you do want to know about the mechanics of the brain and the mind, how it operates, because that all that knowledge is helpful, and understanding, why that man, thinks the way that, he thinks. Why does he behave the way that he behaves? Because there isn't just one, mechanism that's controlling the show, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Usually gets you negative outcomes, especially when we're dealing with children, you know?
Yeah.
They can be frustrating and aggravating and all that stuff. And so they can piss us off. They can do things we don't like. And, they're learning. And if you let your emotions take over, then you can end up yelling. And sometimes,
Oh yeah.
like, sometimes it does take a yell because they don't listen and they just keep going and going and going. And the only thing that makes them stop is seeing that there's this anger in their parent who really doesn't approve, because talking to them nicely and trying to get them to understand, they just don't care, and they just want to be a clown. They want to be an ass, and it's part of being a kid, especially when, I guess, you get older too. It's still a thing for some people. Or when you're a teenager, then
Yeah.
they're more purposefully hurtful as opposed to uh 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old who's learning. Sometimes they do it on purpose, but usually it's like, I don't know, part of I guess learning boundaries and things. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Learning what
so,
not to do.
yeah, so it's important in some conscious parenting to try the more reserved approach first, and then when they don't want to listen to the calm logic and the request, then you got to make demands by being like more firm and "Arr!" And then that usually shakes them out of it. And
Yeah.
apply consequences, take away something that they like, as a lesson to not do it again.
Yeah.
But I think we can end it there. It's been
One
an hour.
thing
What? Yeah, go
in
ahead.
that last
Go
part,
on.
would you explain to them why,
Oh yeah, I
you
was gonna
know,
say that
yeah. Yeah.
because it's gonna be
Yeah.
traumatizing. That's why I wanted to mention. I don't know if that's where you were going.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because even though hell, I don't have kids, then I would still explain to them why, so they can at least try to, analyze and, you know, fix, their, mistake, so it doesn't happen again, or to better understand, if there is some trauma too. Yeah,
yeah, because definitely yelling too much or yelling immediately at maybe every little thing they do. The children, they're learning, and you're gonna freak out every time, or say they broke a plate or a glass. Well, don't yell at them.
yeah,
It's just a plate or a glass. You know, if they're just going around breaking everything, oh, let me grab some plates and glass and throwing them on the floor. Then yeah, you can. Then you can yell at them. But if it's an accident, then so yeah. There's all these emotional things that happen where we disapprove of actions of others, but we don't need to engage in yelling right away. It's always an option, but try to do a more rational explanation for why that's not behavior and request a change.
yeah,
And then, yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, we could keep going and going, but yeah, try to keep it at an hour. More material for the next time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll continue with this next week, next Wednesday at 9. If you'll be there, if anyone else wants to come on. And yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nah, just hope people are, catching these replays. Yeah, because what hell, this was part hell 11. I think I had uploaded
Yeah,
10 of them on some of my platforms. So yeah, hopefully people are getting the replays. So, because some good quality information here.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, especially for the individuals who say they want to get involved. Um, you know, trying to get them to understand like these are some of the requirements that need to be met and present in order for you to do it correctly.
yeah. If anyone wants to add their voice, or they got a point they want to make and elaborate on things and something we missed, well, you click on that video ninja link. You accept your microphone and your video source, and you're off to the races. And it's that simple. Not to and you wear earphones so that there's no feedback between your mic coming in and all that stuff. So make sure you wear earphones. But that's simple. So anyone's welcome. It's a roundtable, open discussion on the topic, whatever the topic is. Well, you can talk about things related to that topic. So thanks for everyone coming by, paying attention, engaging in the chat, making your points there. That's good too. And thank you to you, Brandon, for coming and participating. Very much appreciated. So see you all next week.